You're listening to the Fierce Valley Podcast, episode 137, Fat Shaming in Kids Media. Oh my goodness, I'm your host, Vinnie Wellsby. Let's do it.
Perfect.
Hello, fatties, and welcome to this episode, and honorary fatties. Welcome too. I've got some fat shaming kids media to talk to you about today. Question. Listen, has this ever happened to you? Is there can you provide me a reason why this is happening? So I was on the phone to my doctor the other day getting a repeat prescription, and before we ended the call I said, "Hey doc, can I tell you something? It's probably going to be a little bit weird, but you've probably had many people say it to you in the past." And she said, "Yes, what is it?" I said, "My dog, Dougal, licks the same spot of my leg, has been licking the same spot on my leg. Not a spot as in pimple, an area. Same area on my leg for the last month." And I've seen TV shows where the owner was like, "My dog was sniffing my knee and it turns out that I had knee cancer and my dog saved my life." And I was like, my dad died from a blood clot in his leg that got loose and killed him instantly. And so I was like, oh my God, I've got a blood clot and Doogie's licking this spot in my leg to warn me that I have a blood clot. And I said this to the doctor, and she was like, no one in my whole career has ever asked me if the dog licking a certain area means that there's like something there. And I was like, what? Really? I would thought it would be so common, because I don't know why I thought it would be so common, because I saw a show with someone in a show said it once. And she was like, "Listen, no, these are the signs of a blood clot, like, you'd know, blah, blah, blah." And I was like, well, I've got no symptoms of anything apart from Doogie licking the same spot in my leg. And at first I thought, oh, I must have dropped some gravy on my leg or something, or maybe something splashed on my jeans. But he does it all the time, and it's so alarming. So listen, if there's a listener out there who's like, yeah, oh my goodness, this happened, and it turns out that something, and nothing else has changed. It's not like I'm wearing some sort of new lotion or new washing liquid or anything like that. Yeah. Next episode it'll be like, oh, Vinny's dog was right. And yeah, oh God, I hope not. Anyway, so yeah. Hey, I've been thinking about this. So I've been thinking about this episode, right? I pick out episode topics in advance, and I let my brain mull the topic, because you know what, I think sometimes you need a little space for mulling things. And it happened to be that last week I had a couple of things that I was like, oh, this is great for this podcast, and I just wanted to mention if you wanted to go and look at these things. So the first thing is, on Netflix there's a documentary called Disclosure, and it's about trans people's depictions in the media, and it's really good, really interesting, and talks about all of the fucked up ways transness has been depicted. And from actually the first moving pictures was of gender non-conforming person, potentially a trans person, moving into the idea of transness and blackness as these terrible characteristics of humans, and mocking them together. And it's really interesting, and obviously depressing too, and also like ends on a high note of like, there's some cool trans shows now. And you know, one of my favorite shows, and it reminded me of one of my favorite shows, and I'm rewatching it, is Pose. It's on currently on, it was on Netflix and it's currently on Disney Plus. And I think the original network was FX. I don't know if that's not a Canadian thing. So go watch it if you haven't. It's about the ball culture in the 80s and 90s New York, and the cast is like 80% trans people, like 90+% queer people. It's great. Lots of people of color, black folks. It's amazing. It's great. Yes, and another thing that I've been watching recently too, I've only watched like 3 episodes of it, and it's just so heartwarming, and it's appropriate for younger, like teens, probably not kids, children, babies, toddlers or whatever, but it's on Discovery Plus, which is also Paramount ? And it's called Generation Drag, and it follows young queer kids. Some of them are trans and some of them are gay and drag performers, and they're young and they're going to perform at this they've used the word drag in the word debutante, so debutante ball, but they call it a dragutante ball, and it's just so beautiful and affirming and great. So if you've got kids, and even if you don't, it's not a kids show, right? It's just following young adults, I guess 14, 15, that type of age, as they do this. It's really good. So yes, and what made me think about this episode was watching on Netflix. There's an anthology series that's had 3 seasons called Love, Death and Robots. And it was making me think, okay, so this anthology series is kind of like, how Black Mirror, every episode is different, and it's kind of like a theme of the future with technology, but this is like futuristic. I don't know, not even futuristic, but it's sci-fi, whatever. And it just is flabbergasting how in Love, Death and Robots, I've not watched the first 2 seasons. I just started watching them this 3rd season. Creative minds, how far creativity can go, and all of these different concepts that are related to Love, Death and Robots, and how some are funny and some are beautiful and some are this, and how expansive people's imaginations are. But not so expansive that there could be a fat character that exists in these make-believe universes unless they are there to serve as comedic support. There was one episode, a very short episode, and there was a fat man in it for like 1 minute, and his purpose was supporting a little bit of comedy. It's just so out of the realm in sci-fi that there would be a leading character that is fat. Like, it's like, we can imagine aliens with tentacles coming out of their arseholes, but we can't imagine that a fat person is the lead character. Woo, that's just too wild. And it's just... And actually, last week I watched a webinar from ASDAH, ASDAH. I think ASDAH stands for, Association for Size, Diversity and Health. So ASDAH, and then there's NAFA, NAAFA. So they're the 2 main kind of fat advocacy organizations. And the event that I went to was Afrofuturism, Changing the Narrative on the Future of Bodies, hosted by Stephanie Chisholm. Pronouns she, they. And Afrofuturism is, Wikipedia says, a cultural aesthetic and philosophy of science and history that explores the intersection of the African diaspora culture with science and technology. It addresses themes and concerns of the African diaspora through technoculture and speculative fiction, encompassing a range of media and artists with a shared interest in envisioning Black futures that stem from Afro-diasporic experiences. And so an example that Stephanie says that's a good example of showcasing Afrofuturism is the film Black Panther. And there's another one which is not a film, but there's an written anthology series called Dark Matter, and it's all sci-fi written by black folks. And so in this webinar on Afrofuturism, Stephanie talks about how often marginalized bodies, often fat and black and queer and trans bodies, are not seen in media, and if they are, they're there to serve a purpose of being the villain or being the comedic relief, and how negativity is depicted by blackness and fatness. Really interesting. And how can we make a future where identities, marginalized identities, are at the forefront of media? Well, I don't know about you, I just find it's just so much more interesting when you're watching a show and there's diversity, there's true diversity, not like, I thought diversity in media was watching Sex and the City and being like, oh, well, there's a blonde one, there's a brunette one, there's a ginger one, and there's a slutty one. True diversity, like, very fat people and lots of people of color and disabled people and neurodiverse people, and them not just being like a side character. It just like with Pose doesn't have fatness. Ugh, that's the one thing. Like with Pose, the cis het white people are the outliers, and it just makes it more like visually rich and interesting, and the storytelling is either the writers are a lot of the writers are queer and trans, and they're sharing their stories, and so it's just great all round. So a little bit from Stephanie's webinar. You can go and go to the ASDA website and go find it. Again, the name is Afrofuturism: Changing the Narrative on the Future of Bodies. And so, brief history of Afrofuturism. Writer Mark Derry coined the phrase in his book Flame Wars, the discourse of cyberculture, to describe the work of writers like Samuel Delany and Octavia Butler, who wrote from not only a position in which their protagonists were black, but also, in Delany's case, a queer sensibility. Derry saw science fiction as a vehicle for black folk to truly narrate the black experience of ancestors and their descendants. Okay, so as well, Stephanie says, in the culture, teaching you to hate being fat. So she says, when we see images of so-called fat people in popular culture, we are immediately alerted to judge who they are as human beings by their body size. Black women are often seen as the Mammy or Jezebel character, depending on their bodily dimensions. Yes, fat women especially are either deemed evil or dumb or sassy, depending on the race of the individual. We are expected to especially feel sorry for the fat white woman because she has clearly not been able to control herself and therefore needs to be loved through her shortcomings. Whereas fat women of color can only save themselves from themselves. White women, no matter how bad their characters are, can be redeemed because fatness is not inherent in whiteness. Women of color are fat because that's just how they are. And also she says, isms of feather flock together. So they say transphobic, queer, antagonistic language and stereotypes, racist and misogynistic stereotypes. Fat equals evil. Fat people deserve violence. Fat people cannot control their hunger and must be forced to do it through violence. Fat people hate themselves and others because they hate themselves, and they deserve ridicule because they are lazy and gluttonous. Fat people, even when they are skinny, will be fat because they cannot control themselves. So that's a little kind of like overview of what Stephanie was talking about. So please go and buy the webinar on the ASDA website. The links for everything I'm going to talk about today is in the show notes, fiercefatty.com/1 3, 7. And if you forget, it's always fizzfatty.com/podcast. Okay, so I asked people on my Instagrams, tell me about the most fatphobic TV shows that you have seen for kids, or fatphobic media that you've seen. Because I am not a parent, although I've mentioned before, I am a pibbling, so I have nibblings, and so when I spend time with my nibblings, they're across the channel in Ireland, and I'm in Canada, so I don't get to spend that much time with them, but when I do, we will watch shows, obviously, and that got me interested, a few years ago, of being like, what the fuck? Why is this TV show saying all of this awful shit? But my exposure is limited. So anyway, I want to start out just by a little bit of why this is a problem, fat phobia in kids media. So this is from a blog talking about fat shaming kids shows from Cafe Mom, and it starts: a 2013 study by Leeds University found that kids start demonstrating prejudice against fat people at just 4 years old, after reading stories with different versions of a character named Alfie, a fat Alfie, a thin Alfie, and an Alfie in a wheelchair, and then being asked to compare the characters on certain attributes. Kids said the fat version of Alfie would be less likely than the others to do well in school, be happy with his appearance, or have a lot of friends based solely on how he looked. And these biases don't just apply to fictional characters. A 2017 study found that kids who are fat are less liked by their peers, and more likely to be bullied, excluded, starting as early as first grade. Kids are also increasingly afraid of becoming fat themselves. As many as 34% of 5-year-old girls have tried to restrict their food intake in order to lose weight, and 1 in 4 kids of, it says both sexes, all sexes should be, but I guess they didn't study genderqueer kids. So 1 in 4 kids have been on a diet by the age of 7. While the way we talk about bodies at home plays a major role in how kids view weight and body image, researchers actually cite media exposure and appearance conversations as the strongest predictors of diet-related behavior. Okay, so I got a lot of responses from you fabulous lot on the Instagrams, and also doing some research coming up with the most egregious. So some shows, their theme is fat shaming, and other shows or TV or movies or books or whatever, they just have it woven into storylines. And I think the most egregious, and not every response, 50% of the responses I got was Peppa Pig. And Peppa Pig, the theme is fucking Peppa Pig. Peppa Pig can suck my tits. Peppa Pig is all about how Daddy Pig has a big fat belly. Daddy Pig, I mean, like, that's not like, the show is not let's laugh at Daddy Pig for being fat, but Daddy Pig, his character is there as being the comedic relief and shaming Daddy Pig constantly for his belly. So from this same post from Cafe Mom, Peppa Pig, a cartoon aimed at preschoolers, in which the running joke is that Daddy Pig is fat. Someone wrote an op-ed for Huffington Post all about Peppa Pig, and it says, okay, can Peppa Pig stop fat shaming Daddy Pig all the time? Poor Daddy Pig. And the author of this HuffPost article highlights an episode, although you could watch pretty much any episode and have your jaw agape, being like, whoa. So they describe this episode. On this episode, Peppa Pig makes a password to her treehouse. The password is Daddy's Big Tummy, and everyone laughs at him. Daddy tries and fails to enter the treehouse. And Pepper tells him that his tummy is too big. And they say, Pepper girl, you already burnt him with the password. Now let the man live. So, of course, Daddy Pig goes on to get wedged in the door, although Mama Pig got in just fine and is roughly the same size as Daddy Pig. Poor Daddy Pig. And I watched that clip, and like Peppa Pig's in the treehouse, and Daddy Pig's like, can I come in? And she's like, Daddy Pig, say the password, Daddy Pig. And he says, oh, I'd rather not. And you could see, I don't know, in his facial expression, he says, I'd rather not say it. And I'm like, yes, Daddy Pig, setting boundaries. Don't stand for that bullshit. You tell Pepper to shut the fuck up. And then Mummy Pig and everyone's like, come on, Daddy Pig, say the password. And he says, oh, all right then. And then he says, Daddy's big belly. And they all go, ha ha ha. Even the grandparents are there, motherfuckers, hanging around all laughing. And then Daddy Pig tries to get into the treehouse and he's too fat. And everyone's like, you're such a fat fuck, Daddy Pig. And then in the same episode, they go swimming and Daddy Pig says, I'm going to jump off the diving board. And Pepper comes back and says, silly Daddy, your tummy is too big. And Daddy Pig is like, oh, actually, I'm really good at diving and I'm actually naturally fit. And Peppa Pig says, you don't look very fit, Daddy. Your tummy is a bit big. Fucking. That's when I would like dunk Peppa Pig and be like, get out of the pool. I'm going to go dive and live my fabulous fat pig life. Yeah, so the most egregious is Peppa Pig. So if your kid is watching Peppa Pig, and I know it's so popular, right? There's even like Peppa Pig candy you can get in the UK, like in a big store. Like, the Peppa Pig candy is delicious. It's traveled to, everyone likes it. And so it might be difficult, but some parents have said that what they do is will interrupt the fat phobia and say, is it appropriate to shame Daddy Pig for being fat? No, it's not. We don't judge people on appearances. But in this article here, it goes on to show tweets talking about people saying, oh shit, like this is now starting to affect my kids. One person says, yes, it's caused my toddler to tell everyone that they have, quote, big Daddy Pig tummies. Another person says, the regular dose of body shaming on Peppa Pig. Looking forward to one day explaining why some cartoon pigs are wrong to my daughter. Someone else says, might be time to ban Peppa Pig when the child starts declaring, Daddy has a big fat tummy. Stupid bloody pig. Jesus, the body shaming in Peppa Pig is unreal. I thought Daddy Pig got it bad, but poor Uncle Pig is completely denied his pignity. I don't know what they do to Uncle Pig, but it's worse than what they do to Daddy Pig. The body shaming on Peppa Pig, poor Daddy Pig. Some of us dads are in love with our very big tummies. Yes, exactly. Too much fat shaming on Peppa Pig tonight. We should all be like Daddy Pig and love cookies. And that's the other thing is, of course he loves cookies because he's fat. Lols. Yeah, okay. So, another one. So Arthur, this author says, is a, quote, safe show in our house. So I was half listening as I stood at the counter slicing vegetables. But in the midst of my meal prep, I heard something that caught me off guard. Do I look husky to you guys? Arthur asked his friends. They asked him what that means. It means I'm fat, he said. I had to get new pants yesterday. I listened for a few seconds longer, hoping Arthur was about to wade into progressive, body-positive waters. Instead, his friend said, I know what you need to do. You just need to go on a diet. That's when I told my daughter it's time to turn off the tablet and help set the table. After the kids went to bed, I put the episode back on and was horrified by what I saw. In addition to negative fat and diet talk, the episode features a fantasy sequence in which a circus performer invites people to step right up and gaze at various horrors. One of them is Arthur, or as he's identified in this clip, the laden lump of Elwood City, and the performer isn't shy about describing him as a freak of nature, large, lardy, a lifeless layabout lump of lumpiness. The man hollers, pointing to a gelatinous blob wearing Arthur's signature yellow sweater. The gist of the episode is that Arthur learns dieting is bad and eating nutritious food and exercising is the best way to stay healthy. But the way it arrives at that conclusion is through a plot thick with fat shaming and fat phobia. Yeah. And I mean, it's like the kids heard it, and that's only because the mum had her ears pricked. Like, the kid could have continued watching that episode. And I mean, you know, one isolated incident of horrendous fat phobia, it might not affect a child, but that's not what's happening, right? You know, kids are not in this media bubble where we can monitor what they're watching at all times. And we're swimming in the waters of diet culture and fat phobia. Our whole culture is just soaked in that shit. And of course it means that the writers of these shows are also going to use them as storytelling devices and moralistic tales of don't get fat or else you'll end up in a circus show like Arthur did. So it's everywhere, and it's just frightening. Okay, continuing. Any Disney Channel show or Disney movie. So someone on my story said the fat kids are portrayed as unintelligent and sloppy. Fat characters are evil. And then we have a whole, someone has done a whole analysis on fat, predictable notions, fat Disney, and just fat Disney. Fat Disney. Again, link in the bio, and talks about how fatness is portrayed in Disney, and I would extend this to a lot of media, kids and otherwise, and you know, not just animation as well. So the three areas they've grouped it as is the first one is the comedic reliefs. So we've spoken about that before, and they show examples of the comedic reliefs in Disney. And so we've got Angus Chestnut from the A&T Farm, and the different examples of fat phobia with Angus. Clawhauser from Zootopia. I'm going to talk more about that in a moment. Gus from Cinderella. So Gus is a little mouse. Hookhand from Tangled. And so these are all comedic relief. They're there to be funny. Le Fou from Beauty and the Beast. The Matchmaker from Mulan. The Sultan from Aladdin. Trish De La Rosa from Austin and Ally. Woody Fink from the Life Suite on Deck. And that's it for the comedic reliefs. And that's, I would say that's not, they're given examples here. It's not extensive. And as well, there's media's coming out all the time, right? Okay, so the Simpletons. Gus from Cinderella. Le Fou, the Sultan. Woody Fink. So they're all portrayed as simpletons. And the villains. The matchmaker from Mulan Rouge. Mulan. Anyway, the Queen of Hearts from Alice in Wonderland. You remember that? The 1951 version is this, you know, fat, red-faced, angry. Stinky Pete the Prospector from Toy Story 2. Ursula from The Little Mermaid. Now, Ursula is really interesting because it's been said that Ursula was based on Divine, a drag performer, and based on Divine, because Divine is fat and is a drag performer, like I just said, because they wanted to make the character so repellent, so unfeminine, and queer in the representation of what woman was, and the most just unattractive version. And this is what they've come up with. I mean, if you ask me, I think Ursula is fucking amazing. Like looking at her back rolls. And as well, Stephanie from Afrofuturism was like, what color is Ursula? Now, the other characters, Little Mermaid, she's white. Ursula is not. She's purple. And, what is that purple portraying of, otherness, a creature of color? And it's just, all of the kind of marginalized identities, not all of them, a lot of marginalized identities are rolled up into Ursula. And she is literally this evil, snickering, grinning, nasty, deranged, And I think, you know what? If you've got an Ursula tattoo, I bet that looks so good. Like, I need to get some like artwork with Ursula, because she's like an icon. Yes. So the comedic reliefs, the simpletons are villains. And so notice how if you're watching a Disney movie, or any movie at all, like how are fat characters portrayed? Do they have a leading role? And if they do have a leading role, is the movie about how they are about weight, how they are trying not to be fat, how they are accepting their fat? It's got something to do. Often if there is a lead character who is fat, it's about fatness, right? It's not just like, oh, there's a human being. They will weave a fat storyline in there, because you can't just be a fat person. And of course there are exceptions to this rule. It's like, what are they? And you're like, so quote, even Frozen, the recent Disney blockbuster lauded for its progressive take on love and its inclusion of a clumsy, awkward princess character, failed to break the slim-waisted, tiny-toed mode. Princess Anna's eyeball is even wider than her arm. Oh my god. Is that the standard we have to live by now? Our arms have to be as thinner than our eyeballs. Sounds good. There's this other Tumblr board post which is called Fat Media Messages, a brief history of Disney fat villains. And what this says, quote, dating back as early as the 1920s with Disney's earliest recurring character, Pete. So you just mentioned Pete. Disney has relied on tired stereotypes about size in a significant portion of its films. These stereotypes help to reinforce the societal understandings of weight and the concept that thin is good and fat is evil. While not all of Disney's movies and shows rely on this trope, enough of them do that a pattern is apparent to those who look deeper into the ideas Disney promotes and reinforces with the narratives it tells. Some of the main assumptions about fat people include the idea that they must be lazy and out of control, both of which likely contribute to the fat villain trope. For if one is lazy and therefore can't achieve or acquire things on their own, as well as out of control, their accomplishments must depend on taking from or harming others, just as fat people are viewed as harmful and dangerous to the fabric of society. I really like that last line. I'm going to repeat it. For if one is lazy and therefore can't achieve or acquire things on their own, as well as out of control, their accomplishments must depend on taking from or harming others, just as fat people are viewed as harmful and dangerous to the fabric of society. Yes. And this person lists all of the fat villains that they can think of. Ursula, the Queen of Hearts, Alice in Wonderland, Governor Ratcliffe, Pocahontas, Lawrence from The Princess and the Frog, and Pete, Mickey Mouse Universe. Common traits in these characters include loudness, selfishness, greed, and unnecessary cruelty. Yeah, fat people are cruel. And if we know that kids are from the age of forming opinions about fat people and being negative, then I mean they've got to be pretty powerful if you are seeing certain people as the good guys and certain people as the bad guys. Okay, so continuing, iCarly. So iCarly, I just listened to the book that just came out called I'm Glad My Mother Is Dead by Jeanette McCurdy, and she was Sam in iCarly. I never watched iCarly, but from that title I was like, I want to read that book. It's a good book, and it talks about the relationship she had with her mum and how her mum basically abused her and taught her to have an eating disorder. And her character on iCarly was like, her shtick was that she loved food, which was ironic considering that she was not permitted to eat, and other things too, like her mum showered her and her brother together until they were like 17, 18, something like that. Really fucking weird. So anyway, on iCarly, the whole show is, chock-a-block filled with fat phobia, but there is a character called Gibby, and people have said that he was the butt of fat jokes. And I watched a funniest Gibby moments thing because I wanted to see like what was going on with this Gibby character, and often the joke is look at him without his shirt on. And he's a kid. He's a fucking kid. Like, this actor is a kid. And even though he's an actor, he's not immune from the fact that this whole thing is like, okay, get the kid to take his shirt off. And everyone's like, oh my God, there's a fucking child over there and their body is gross. And it's hilarious. Yeah. And apparently he didn't come back for the reboot. And so people are like, well, yeah, because he was treated like shit. I don't know, if that's true or not, but... yeah. So Coco Melon. So this is the what started it for me. It was me watching Coco Melon and seeing the song Johnny, Johnny, yes, Papa, and being like, what the fuck is this? And so the idea of this cartoon, this segment, not the whole cartoon, is parents. Dad is in the kitchen with the lights off, sneaking around, and you can see like there's a shadow of him sneaking around like, a robber in the night, and he's eating, quote, bad food. Mum comes in, turns the light on, catches him, and he's shocked, and then lies about eating the quote bad food, and then the mum says, open your mouth, let me see the mouth. And then the roles are reversed. The mum is that, and then the dad says that. So they eat. The first one is pizza, ice cream, donuts, and candy. I mean, if that's not telling you that pizza, ice cream, donuts, and candy are bad. And then at the end, it culminates with the kids catching both of them, and they say, we've caught you eating, quote, junk food. And then there's another version where the baby is eating sugar. And I'm like, if I saw any of these behaviors, and I know it's a cartoon, but if I saw any of these behaviors, I'd be like, okay, it sounds like there's a lot of restriction and food shaming going on in this household. Because if you're all sneaking food in the nighttime, you're not getting enough food. So, I mean, you need to start normalizing eating pizza and ice cream and donuts and candy and sugar. Because there's a fucking baby who's coming out of his crib in the middle of the night to eat cubes of sugar. Someone call CPS over here. Like, Johnny, he's so young, can't even talk. But he's learned how to climb up into the cupboard to get some sugar. Oh my god. Another big one was Harry Potter. And obviously, Harry Potter, the author, J.K. Rowling, is a human turd because of her transphobic her continual work to harm trans people. So someone has shared, Harry's uncle and cousin are both described as fat and evil interchangeably. And so I've never read or watched Harry Potter. It's just never interested me. And so I Googled this because I wanted to learn more. We have a blog from insider.com. How I introduce Harry Potter to my kids as a fat millennial. So I know that people love Harry Potter, and it feels like it's probably like this really magical thing, and how to take away the author from the stories and the goodness that is Harry Potter. And also this author is talking about how to take away the fat phobia. So this is what she's saying. After being disillusioned by Rowling's transphobic remarks, I began noticing places where Harry Potter fell short, including the book's fat shaming. I have a history of an eating disorder that I'm dealing with in therapy as an adult, and I want my kids to be free of diet culture. It's hard to pass on that lesson when I'm reading them as a book series where Rowling repeatedly puts down her fat characters. Dudley and Vernon Dursley are vicious bullies. Rubus Hagrid is over-emotional and dumb. Molly Weasley is controlling and overprotective, and I'm presuming they're all fat characters. On the very first page of the first book, Vernon is introduced as a villainous, beefy man. Hagrid, one of the good guys, is later described as simply too big to be allowed because he is half giant, not a normal wizard. He's also regularly put down for his perceived lack of intelligence. In later chapters, Dudley, a bully who's very fat and hated exercise, is pitted against small and skinny Harry. When Hagrid meets Dudley, he jokes about the child not needing any more food and gives him a pig's tail on his fat bottom. Hagrid isn't remorseful about this abuse. In fact, he meant to turn Dudley completely into a pig. Then we have Molly Weasley, who is pretty much depicted as powerful only in her capacity as a mother. She's first introduced as the boy's mother. Then more than once she's referred to as the plump woman. So so Harry Potter, another thing that you have to be careful about. And so what this author is saying is that she will point out, saying, is it okay for Hagrid to make fun of that person because of their size, even if that person is mean to them? And the answer is no. And I see this playing out in adults, right? The idea of we can make fun of Trump because of his size, or we can make fun of Trump because of his, if he has, if he's unintelligent or he has some sort of mental health issue. And it's like, no, we can't. We can make fun of Trump because he is an awful human and the things that he says are heinous. We don't make fun of the way he looks because we're stooping to the level of others who make fun of others for the way they look. And we just don't do that. But we've learned from kids that we do, Like, I used to always be like, when I was a kid, I used to always be like, well, if someone says that I'm fat, I can say, well, I can lose weight, but you can't lose ugly. You can't fix that face. Like, and that felt so good to me that I could come back to them and say, I might be fat, but you're fucking ugly. And now I'm like, I understand why I'd say that, but I mean, it's doing the same thing, But really, like, what could have young me done at the time? But like, why are you saying that? That's you're being very, that's what I did at the time. Whatever. Okay, so the next one, and this is one that I remember was really egregious and stuck with me for a very long time, and that's Wall-E. So someone said in my stories, Wall-E, essentially the world went to shit because all fat folks do is eat and watch TV and are lazy. There's a Slate piece that is about this, called Pixar's Wall-E Sends the Wrong Message About O-Word and the Environment. So quotes, Pixar's new animated feature Wall-E is more than a great movie. According to the critics, it's a tranchant social commentary. New York's David Edelstein calls it one for the ages, a masterpiece to be savoured before or after the end of the world, a sublime work of art. A.O. Scott coos over a cinematic poem of such wit and beauty that its darker implications may take a while to sink in. Even New York Times columnist Frank Rich gets in on the action, lauding the film for being in touch with what troubles America and providing a gentle, if unmistakable summons to remake the world before time runs out. So, what is this powerful and profound message? Wall-E tells us that if we don't change the way that we live, we'll all get really fat and destroy the world. The plot begins with the idea that a mega corporation called By and Large has essentially taken over the planet and induced so much consumption and waste that humans must escape their dying planet on an enormous space-faring cruise ship. Once on board, their self-destructive tendencies only get worse. After 700 years adrift, humans have grown too bloated to walk and too lazy to think. It's this cartoon of commentary on modern life that so dazzles the critics. Slate's Dana Stevens describes a richly detailed satire of contemporary humankind, in which the world population is O-word, so fat, infantile consumers who spend their days immobile in hovering lounge chairs, staring at ads on computer screens. In other words, American. Edelstein sums things up in 5 words. You should see these blobs. And they're talking about depictions of fat humans. Continuing, let me raise a voice of dissent. Wall-E is an innovative and visually stunning film, but the satire, in quotes, it draws is simple-minded. It plays off the easy analogy between fatness and ecological catastrophe, pushing the notion that Western culture has sickened both our bodies and our planet with the same disease of affluence. According to this lazy logic, a fat body stands in for a distended culture. We gain weight and the earth suffers. If only society could get off its big fat ass and go on a diet. But the metaphor only works if you believe familiar myths about fatness. They're weak-willed, indolent, and stupid. Sure enough, that's how Pixar depicts the future of humanity. The people in Wall-E drink cupcakes in a cup. They never exercise, and if they happen to fall off their hovering chairs, they'll thrash around like babies until a robot helps them up. They watch TV all day long and can barely read. I mean, that is so much, right? And I don't know if it's coming across to you, the absolute violence of that sequence. I remember seeing it, and I was in my dieting. My goodness, I've just realized I'm like comforting myself. I started like hugging my arm and my face because it's so awful. It's so awful. I remember seeing that when I was deep in my dieting days and just being like, oh my God, yes, I am so close to being that. You know, just so... It's egregious. It really is. And it's actually really, really sad. It's really sad because I went and rewatched a bit of the sequence, like 5 minutes of it. And it's don't put yourself through that. If you're like, oh, I'm gonna go watch it, and you're just, I'd advise don't, because it's really, and the way that they animate these people, it's just, you can see the vitriol through the animation, through the way that the bodies move. You can see that they have put people in fat suits and copied the way that they walk in a fat suit to make the animation look like fat people walking. I mean, it's fucked. It's fucked. Don't watch it. It's fucked. Okay, so here's a little bit of a nicer story. Fucking Wall-E can suck my floppy tits. Okay, so the very hungry caterpillar. So the very hungry caterpillar, someone said he eats everything in sight and then becomes fat. The next day he eats a single leaf and feels better. Someone else had sent me a message, and they said, the very hungry caterpillar, especially since Eric Carle, the author, illustrator, didn't want the line about it becoming very sick after eating so much. The moral was supposed to be eat what you need to grow, but the publisher thought it sent the wrong message and forced him to include it, and it's like in every American classroom. Yeah, I mean, I read it when I was a kid, and so I found a piece about this, about what Eric said, the author. So he was interviewed about his experience in 2015 with the Paris Review. And so while the message of the very hungry caterpillar is about growing into the people that we dream of being, Carl wanted to deliver another message. He says, "My publisher, World Publishing Company, and I fought bitterly over the stomachache scene in The Very Hungry Caterpillar," he revealed. "The caterpillar, you'll recall, feasts on cake, ice cream, salami, pie, cheese, sausage, and so on," he continued. "After this banquet, I intended for him to proceed immediately to his metamorphosis, but my publisher insisted that he suffer an episode of nausea first, that some punishment follow his supposed overeating. This disgusted me," he said honestly. "It ran entirely contrary to the message of the book." Carl explained that the publishers were likely concerned about encouraging gluttony, but he didn't believe that children should be concerned about such things. "The caterpillar is, after all, very hungry, as sometimes we all are," Carl said. "He has recognized an immense appetite within him and has indulged it, and the experience transforms him, betters him. Including the punitive stomachache ruined the effect. It compromised the book. I don't recognize childhood, word," he stated plainly. "No one should. I see children doing what they like, which is eating, and doing it without the shame or remorse later drilled into them by Judeo-Christian ethics." Yes, Eric Carle. He was straight-sized, by the way. Ugh. Let's go out to find all the Hungry Caterpillar books and rip out the page where the caterpillar is sick and eats a leaf. And make the story the way it should have been. Wouldn't that have been a beautiful story if that's the way it was? But they couldn't. Publishers like, well, no, what if children eat food to help their growing bodies, just like a caterpillar needs food to transform into a butterfly? Yeah. I mean, I read it as a kid, and I personally don't remember him being sick. So but that doesn't mean that it wasn't in there. So I wonder if the British version didn't have that. I don't know. It'd be nice if it didn't, wouldn't it? I just remember seeing all the illustrations of the food and just being like, oh my god, that looks so amazing. Because I was in diet land at that time, as a kid. Oh, bless me. And just thinking, oh, that looks so amazing. So, that's kind of cool to hear, but obviously sucks to see the outcome of that. Okay, so other ones. Trolls. One of the main characters, King Gristle Jr., asks a girl out and then immediately goes home and hots on the treadmill because he wants to lose 30 pounds in the next 8 hours. And this is seen a lot. There's a lot of cartoons where when there's a love interest, there's some type of thing happening around food. Either I can't eat in front of the date, I need to lose weight before the date, or I'm too fat to get a date. Like if there's a date, if there's love and the fatness, even if there's not, thinness is required for love. Zootopia. So we mentioned this earlier, but a little bit more about this. Zootopia is about the problems with stereotyping and prejudice, while they stereotype and marginalize the fat cheetah police officer, whose big comedic moment of glory is not realizing he has a donut lodged under his double chin, and he is almost exclusively shown as eating in every single scene, because apparently the defining quality of a fat character in a kids show is that they consume food non-stop. Recently there was a reboot of Snow White. I think it was made in South Korea originally. I don't know if I'm just, that's in my brain somewhere. I don't know if I'm picking it out and that's a load of bullshit, but so there was a new depiction of Snow White, and I don't know if you remember, but because they were calling it and the Seven Dwarves, and we don't use the word dwarves anymore, we use the word little people. And what's his name from Game of Thrones? Tyrion, and the actor's name is Peter Dinklage. Who is a little person, was like, come on now, are we still doing this? And so it got a little bit of press, but what didn't get as much press is the advertising around it, which was basically, what if there was a poster saying, what if Snow White was no longer beautiful, and what if the dwarves were no longer short? And they showed the beautiful version, which is, just the thin character, and then the ugly version was a fat version of Snow White. Cool. So, double bigotry in that one. So we've got, fatness and talking shit about little people. So yeah, that's fun. The 2015 SpongeBob movie, SpongeBob Out of Water, includes a scene which two fish go on a date. In the background, there's a lonely fat fish whose chair breaks as he's gorging on a cheeseburger. Sounds cool. Other mentions here: Fuller House, Shrek, someone mentioned the ogres are ugly and therefore fat. Augustus Gloop from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Yep, that has stuck with me. In that song. And yeah, Bluey, which is a cartoon. Carbs are demonized and Bandit starts to become very body concerned. The Wiggles, Series 2, Episode 48, is called Anthony Has Overeaten. Lazy Town. Kung Fu Panda, the plot being that he's fat. And oh my god, what do you mean a fat person can be a kung fu star? Someone says it perpetuates fatphobic stereotypes. The notion that being fat is somehow funny, but in my opinion it wasn't too bad at first. It had a pass until Kung Fu Panda 3 went all the way fatphobic, like really, really bad. Someone else says, Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. He gets stuck in Rabbit's door and refused food for days. Monster House. It's basically the entire plot of the film. So I went and watched the trailer for Monster House. It's a animated film. And I was like, oh, I'm not seeing the fat phobia in there. Is it because there's a fat sidekick? And so I did some searching around, and actually, so there's a whole Tumblr post about it, and it's really egregious. Like it's getting into Wall-E territory, and you can't tell it from the trailer. Someone else says Hannah Montana, which is, I think, any tweeny type thing like that, there's 100% chance there's going to be fat phobia, diet culture. Someone else said, The Little Blue Truck. The book calls the mean dump truck the big fat truck. Total Drama Island cartoon. The fat character is the unintelligent one. The Berenstain Bears. There's a book about junk food and exercise. SpongeBob. If they eat too many Krabby Patties, they become instantly fat and then explode. And some people mentioned cartoons, which I think are more aimed at older people, which is Family Guy and The Simpsons, which, I mean, another one that traumatized me was the Simpsons episode where Homer gets so fat he has to wear a muumuu, and he gets a that pecking bird thing to do his work for him, because apparently he's so lazy, because fat people are so lazy they don't work, and he gets the bird to peck the keys, and then I think the factory blows up, or whatever it's called, a nuclear plant. And I mean, yeah. And there's actually a TikTok account called Maya Garland, MAYAGARLAND_, and she talks about fat phobia, analyzing diet culture. So she talks about all of this type of stuff, and so she has like 50 billion different examples, because people are like, you know, tell them to her, and she shows them, and it's like, ooh, gross. So ending here with a little a thing that Josie Blanc shared. Josie made a film called Tales of Ordinary Fat Phobia. It's not a kids thing, but it's a short film that you can watch, talking about people's experience with fat phobia. Link in the show notes. Tales of Ordinary Fat Phobia. You can just Google it. And she talks about why this stuff is important. And so she says, being reduced to a stereotype of what people see in the media is harmful. It creates bias and contributes to discrimination, especially when there is one single narrative that is portrayed over and over and over again. Growing up, the number of times I've heard, but you're not really black, or you're different from the other ones, like we're just one size fits all. Spoiler alert, we're not. Got hiccups. We need true diverse representation on screen. It makes the stories more authentic, which at the end creates better content. And this goes for all groups who are underrepresented: Black, Indigenous, people of colour, LGBTQ+, fat people and disabled people too. And with that, she shares an image quote tweet from Rabbi Danya Rottenberg that says, we need diverse representation, not only so every kid can see themselves as the hero of the story, but so that every kid can understand that other kinds of kids are also the heroes of the story. There's this famous quote, I can't remember who said it: you can't be who you can't see. And I think that is very true, and why it is so joyous when we do see people who look like us portrayed in positive ways. It's just so fucking amazing. Yeah. So, saying that, let's end with things that do promote something a little bit better. And actually, this was really hard for me to find shows that are fat positive, because doesn't seem to be any kind of list. There's like body positive stuff, but there's not explicit fat positive stuff. We do have a list of books about body diversity, and I've got it's like it's a good number long. It's probably 30 long. But then again, I'm not sure how many are explicitly about fatness. I know some of them are. And so let's go to and have a look at this piece that says movies and TV shows that promote positive body image for kids. One of them I know I've seen my nibbling watch is Sing, the movie, and the characters in it are, I mean, they're animals, and so are they fat? But there's like an elephant, and there's another quote fat animal, and they're not plot points, and it just shows them being brave and singing. So that's one, and I think that came out more recently. Okay, so let me give you some more. Oh, actually, this is like really. Okay, so Earth to Luna, age 4+. Doc McStuffins, 4+. Androids, 5+. Exploration Outer Space. Terry the Tomboy. Scorpion, Anne of Green Gables. Spirited Away, age 9+. It's really Spirited Away? I don't know if that's a kid's movie. Wadija, age 9+. 23 Blast. The Sisterhood of the Travelling Pants. Real Women Have Curves, age 14+. I don't like the title of that. Real Women Have Curves. Real women have anything. Like, fucking, I hate real women anything. Fuck that. Anyway. So there are some. Again, I'm going to have the link for this on the show notes. I mean, none really are explicitly fat. Like, this word, The Real Women Have Curves. America Ferrera stars in the movie, and it's about coming of age and body image, and America is actually not, she's not fat, she's chubby, but still straight size, Anna Green Gables, I think that, it's a straight size person. Anyway, so I think we're still getting there with kid stuff, and so if you see any really good fat representation, specific, and it's not about how they're fat and they're overcoming, it's just that they're fat and they're cool. I know that movie came out recently with Disney, I can't remember the name of it, and there's a character in it, Strong. Is it called Strong kids movie. It's called Encanto. Oh my goodness. After a freaking 5 minutes, it's because the person is not the main character. There's a strong woman in it who is, I guess, big. I wouldn't say that they're fat. I think there's a whole song as well with them being like, I'm strong, and let me give you the kind of what it is. They say people like it because of its diversity, good songs. The plot is a Colombian teenage girl has to face the frustration of being the only member of a family without magical powers. Oh, that sounds good. I mean, if you're a parent, you're probably like, yeah, man, fucking Encanto came out a year ago. We've watched it 75,000 times already. On the off chance that you haven't seen it. And I haven't seen it either, right? But this is so I can't even say that it's fat positive, but I've seen people say that they appreciate that character, which is nice. So go to the show notes to find all the links for everything. So for the links for the book celebrating body diversity and the body positive TV show roundup, and off the top of my head, Sing and Encanto are both movies that we can watch, and as well, like, take these with a pinch of salt in regards to body positive, because it's probably not fat positive, and also, like, a lot of times people don't know what is diet culture. They don't know, and so something that the makers can say, this is a body positive thing, or and there could be diet jokes in there, and it's like, well, because they don't, when people are so steeped in diet culture and fat phobia, it's everywhere, and sometimes we don't know when something is diet culture or fat phobia, and so we're like, well, we're not egregiously saying fat people are pieces of shit, but we are laughing about how big their tummies are, so it's like we're so positive, and so yeah, take them with a pinch of salt. And I think the thing is with all of this stuff, it's inevitable that kids, all of us, are going to be exposed to messages about what bodies should look like and the fact that fat is bad. And I think what we can do to overcome those things is having conversations around this stuff and instilling core values within our communities that says that that's not okay, so that when younger people do see those messages, they've got that counter message from you that's consistent in their life. Because it can't be like a one-time conversation, because I'm telling you, diet culture and fat phobia are after our brains, and they don't stop at kids, right? And they're going to be there every single day. And so we need to be spreading these values to our communities, our young people, as much as possible, and talking about it and living those values of not judging others for the way that they look, and having food freedom mindset and all that type of jazz. So alright, so again, the show notes you can find at fiercefatty.com/137, and I will see you on the next episode. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Goodbye, fatty. Stay fierce. I'll see you later in a while. Goodbye.